He had the studio built in order to create a group of paintings to be donated to the French government, a kind of Monet environment. Working on them, he sometimes heard ammunition trains going by on the railway to Rouen. Sometimes he heard artillery firing beyond the studio. It's 1917 now, and the First World War has been going on for 3 years. Monet is completely cut off from it. Monet was the main Impressionist and also the purist. He controlled the Impressionist brand. He identified himself with it. With his water lilies in his old age, he took the style out to its furthest extreme of pure floating atmospheric shimmer. The theme of Monet's water lily paintings is to be frankly decorative. Decorative is a dirty word in art today. It's like the plague. It kills whatever it touches. It kills it with shallowness, which we know to be bad. Shallowness is confusing here, though. There really is no other meaning than what you're seeing. What are you seeing? A surface. The surface of the pond as a mirror to the sky. No actual sky, just reflections of blue, broken up by reflections of trees and blasts of light, that characteristic no colour that you get when light hits water. And then there's the surface of paint, those amazing strokes doing their stroke thing, every touch and scrawl and blip of colour, bringing to life every other touch and scrawl. So the whole thing seems to be constantly moving, constantly changing, like the thing that Monet is depicting. And you get the feeling that the idea of the water lily pond is just an excuse for all this. It is asking you to get into it purely visually, to see it as nothing but itself. This isn't the end of the Impressionism story. Some much more bizarre tales are still to come, but it is the end of Impressionism's absolutely pure phase. The story now closes in around its hero, Monet, with his visual supersensitivity, excluding himself from the world, not noticing that the First World War was going on just beyond his garden. When Monet died at home in his bed in Giverny in 1926, aged 86, he'd been out of fashion for years. He sold to millionaires. He was a millionaire himself, but his type of visually delightful, drifting beauty no longer fitted with avant-gardism. Cubism had been invented by Picasso and Braque. In fact, it had been around for 20 years. Picasso didn't like Monet's art and ignored it, so all the other modern art isms after Cubism ignored it too. Surrealism was the big one now, a totally non-beauty movement. Then Monet came back into fashion in the 1950s when New York abstract expressionism came in. He seemed to fit that, and from that boost his reputation rose in a kind of awkward, staggered ascent, in which abstract expressionism goes out of intellectual fashion, so Monet is forgotten again by art people, but because of the rise of the culture industry, he's loved by ordinary people, to his present position where he's the most popular artist in the world, a total blockbuster, adored because of the Monet lifestyle, rather than for what actually makes his paintings tick. People now go to blockbuster shows of Monet and they think, hey, what's wrong with being superficial? Why get involved with difficulty? Well, I don't know. How is that wrong exactly? Impressionism is a much more fraught and complicated movement in art than we perhaps usually realise. It's a constant problem in modern art with what was once vivid and urgent becoming anodyne. Difficulty is an antidote to blandness. Maybe that's more like it. It certainly leads naturally to the last artist in our programme. Paul Cézanne had an absolutely difficult personality. Sullen, full of tantrums, smelly, afraid of women, couldn't bear it if they touched him, if they just brushed by. A fanatic Catholic, obsessive, solitary, right-wing and paranoid. Enter the tortured but incredibly beautiful world of Cézanne after the break. Hello, welcome back. Cézanne is the Impressionist who takes Impressionism into modern art. He takes the spontaneity and movement of Monet and puts in structure. He slows Impressionism down. He puts cerebral difficulty in with sensual pleasure. It was Picasso who looked back at Cézanne and said it wasn't Cézanne's apples, but Cézanne's anxiety that was the thing. So Cézanne is an absolute blue-chip nicist, but he's already giving you a bit of nasty in with his nice. When he was young, he was a much more horrible artist. He did psycho murder scenes like this. Impressionism liberated him from his own inner storms. In art, he could control his emotions. In life, he couldn't. Cézanne came from the town of Aix-en-Provence in the south of France. He was born in 1839 in this street, Rue de l'Opéra. When he was young, he hated his family. He feared his father. His father was uneducated but wealthy. He'd been a hat maker, made money, and then became co-boss of a successful bank. When Cézanne was 21, he painted his father in his early, marvellously grim style. His father passed on to Cézanne his own anxious, obsessive personality. The father agonized that he wasn't taken seriously by polite society because he was a self-made man and because he only married the mother of his 3 children after they were all born. Cézanne was illegitimate. Cézanne's youthful love object was Émile Zola. They were at school together in Aix. They both loved art and literature. They were both clever. They went on walks and swims together in the Provence countryside. They read each other their verses. Zola became the great realist novelist. He encouraged Cézanne, who was much braver than Cézanne. He didn't have a tyrannical father. The father wanted Cézanne to be a lawyer. Cézanne wanted to be an artist. The father finally gave in, so long as he could keep a neurotic control over his son's every movement. Cézanne lived in a hell of the mind. In fact, his first home when he lived in Paris was here in Rue d'Enfer, Hell Street. His father set him up in a room in this house. He signed on at a cheap art class, the Académie Gley, where he met Monet and the future Impressionists. He kept trying to get accepted by the Grand Academy of Fine Art, but he kept failing. So he slunk back to Aix and worked in his father's bank. "What are you doing?" said Zola. "Get back to Paris." So he came back to the Rue d'Enfer. And this was the beginning of the double life that he was to lead for year after year, partly in Paris, partly in Aix, and miserable in both. Every year he sent paintings to the Salon, which every year rejected them. He tried to shock everyone, the Salon, the Impressionists. He got in a shock rut. The Impressionists would be at whatever hangout Manet was at in order to be near the great star. Cézanne would sit in an imploded, unwashed heap, furiously shy, and then suddenly blurt out a bit of bonhomie shattering rudeness. He once said to Manet, "I won't shake your hand, Monsieur Manet. I haven't washed for 8 days." Another time, Manet politely asked Cézanne what he was preparing for that year's Salon, and Cézanne replied, "I'm preparing a load of merde." Interesting integrity, you probably think. Sounds good. But you can imagine how tedious it probably was to have to encounter it in real life, and how you might want to avoid it and maybe see his paintings in a certain light, the weird, nightmarish things he was trying unsuccessfully at this time to get accepted by the Salon. This is one of Cézanne's takes on Manet's Déjeuner sur l'herbe, a paradise of naked women surrounding Cézanne. All our other artists in this programme had sensational love lives. Cézanne never had any love at all and remained a virgin until 1869, when he was 30, when he began an affair with the model Hortense Fiquet.
They had a son also called Paul. It was him, Hortense and Paul all surviving on his allowance from his father, which he knew would be cut off if his father ever found out he had a family.